Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Harshmeet Singh and I welcome you to this class, which is class for chapter number 4 of class 11th NCERT for economics. So far we have covered the first 3 chapters and we have been able to understand and extract all the nitty-gritties and informations that are given in those chapters. Chapter number 4 here of class 11th NCERT is titled Human Capital Formation in India. Now, this might seem like a generic topic or this might seem like a topic that has very generalized information, but the fact is you do see a lot of questions from this part as well, especially in the mains examination. For example, when you talk about human capital in a country, you mainly refer to things such as education, sanitation, healthcare, the basic amenities that everyone in the country requires, and a large part of the country, especially in a country like India, are dependent on the government to provide these services. Unfortunately, due to various reasons that we will discuss in this class, the government of India has not been able to live up to the expectations, especially when it comes to the amount of expenditure that we do in most of these sectors. We lag behind many of the countries around the world, especially the developed countries, when it comes to having expenditure in these areas, because of which we still have a lot of work to do in the healthcare sector, especially in the public healthcare sector. We still see very few people actually having insurance. Out of expenditure, out of pocket expenditure rather, is extremely high in India. All these things will be discussed in today's class. So let's begin with the very first basic idea of what exactly are we going to discuss. As I said, human capital formation mainly refers to those skills that an individual requires in order to have a successful, happy and satisfied life. Now, if I ask you, for example, what is the skill or what are the facilities that you would require in order to have a good life, mainly your answers should revolve around education, healthcare, skill, making sure that the government laws are simple to adhere to. All these kind of things form basic idea of what human capital formation is. Now, for a country like India especially, it is even more important. Why? I'm sure all of you would have heard this phrase time and time again, that India is experiencing something called demographic dividend. India is in a stage of demographic dividend, which refers to a situation where most of India's population is in the working age. Means a majority of the population actually contributing to the economy, and the people who are dependents, either kids or elderly, the people who are dependent on the government form a minority. So this is where we right now, India is in a stage of demographic dividend. India's average age right now is about 28.4 years. Means a lot of people in India are in a stage where they can work and they are able to contribute to the economy in terms of GDP, in terms of taxes, in terms of giving jobs. All these are factors which are an advantage that India has. However, just having more young people or just having more people in that working age group does not mean automatically an advantage for the country, because you also have to prepare them. You also have to give them the required skill set. You also have to give them the required quality of life to make big in life. This is where India has to focus on what we call as human capital formation. In this chapter, we will be discussing about what India has done specifically in these areas, especially underlining India's problems and the government's approach in the field of education and healthcare. These are the two major areas that have been highlighted in this chapter. Apart from that, we'll also be discussing some of the other examples or some of the other issues that the government has been working on when it comes to human capital formation. Broadly, these are the 4 areas where the governments across the world work towards when they want to ensure human capital formation. First, they focus on education so that the person is skilled enough, equipped enough to find jobs, to sustain themselves, to become an earning member of the society. Secondly, the government focuses on healthcare. Now, please understand this. Whenever someone says that our education system or healthcare system is not up to the mark, please do remember we are mainly referring to the public sector. So when you say the education system is not up to the mark, or when you say the healthcare is not up to the mark, what we actually mean to say is the public sector. Because see, if you have the money and you can afford it, In that case, you will get the best of healthcare anyways. Similarly, if you have the money and you can afford it, there are a lot of private institutions that will give you the best quality of education at par with any other country in the world. The problem in these cases, when we say that the healthcare system or the education system may not be up to the mark, in these cases, the problem that we are usually referring to are mainly the problems that are seen in the public sector sphere. And this is the big difference between the two. So please remember, whenever you are referring to these kind of problems or whenever you are writing about this, do keep in mind that in all these areas you are mainly referring to the problem in the public sector. In the private sector, if you can afford it, although it should not be the case like that, but if you can afford to shell out a lot of money, you will not have any problem in healthcare or in education. Apart from that, the governments also focus on training of different types. You might have seen so many of these news reports that say that a majority of Indian graduates are not skilled enough to find jobs in the market. When we say that there is lack of jobs or there is lack of employment in the country, it has also got to do with a different type of unemployment. If you read about the different types of unemployments that exist, one of the types of unemployment that we have, one of the types of unemployment that we actually have is called as structural unemployment. In economics, we read about different types of unemployment. Like we have cyclic unemployment, we have seasonal unemployment, we have disguised unemployment. Similarly, we have structural unemployment. Structural unemployment is a situation where the skill set that the industry demands, the skill set that the companies are demanding, are not found in the candidates. So there are candidates available, there are a lot of them trying to find jobs, searching for jobs, but just that they just don't have the skills available to match with what the company is actually requiring. That is called a structural unemployment. This is also a problem that the government is trying to solve with the help of training of different types. There are multiple skill development programs, for example, that the government tries to run. Programs such as the Deen Dayal Upadhyay skill development. Then the companies also provide on-job training. For example, these big IT companies like TCS, Infosys, when they hire engineers, engineering graduates who are supposed to know about programming, they are still given a few months of training by these companies first. That's an on-job training, so that they are skilled enough to handle real projects and practical projects. Then there are issues, government also tries to ensure free flow of information, because only when information is available to the people, only then they would be able to make the best informed decisions for themselves, for the society and for the country. These are certain things which are a part of human capital formation. This is what the government does. Now, let's look at these one by one now. What are the different sources of human capital? The human capital derives itself from where, and what is it that the government is focusing on? Now, if you actually see, the first big idea, the first big area where not just India but every country in the world, every government focuses on is education. So much talk has been had about education. There is so much discussion about how education should go ahead. We have the National Education Policy recently introduced by the government, where a lot of different changes have been suggested in the education system in India. The fact remains that education is extremely wide. You can categorize education into different skills or different groups depending upon how you are treating it. For example, if you categorize education on the basis of the target student, then it is elementary education is different, secondary is different, higher education is different. On the other hand, the kind of education that people are actually being taught, there is an education that you take to earn a degree, to earn a diploma, and there's education that you take for skill development, to get a job, especially those are vocational training courses. Government has a responsibility to focus on all these points of education. Not just do we have to focus on skill development, we also have to ensure that all the levels, the vertical levels of education, all of them are given importance by the government. Now, what is it that the education sector looks like, and where do we stand right now? Broadly, you can categorize education into formal education and non-formal or informal education. Formal education, basically, you go to school, you go to college to get this kind of education. across the country, for example, we have the same structure in the schools. There may be a slight difference in the curriculum, the syllabus that is taught, but generally the same structure. You have pre-nursery, then you start with class 1, or KG, then you start with class 1, 2, 3, 4 up to class 12, and then you go to graduation, then you go to post-graduation. So there is a proper structure which is uniform across the country that is followed. That's a formal education. It has a structured curriculum. It also may focus on specialized training. For example, when you enter graduation, there is a specific field that you have to choose. Not everyone studies the same thing in graduation. Some people want to study science, some people want to study arts, commerce, medicine, etc. All that is a very structured approach, and this is where most of the population is focused on. So that is focused on the general population. On the other hand, we have non-formal education. Non-formal education is something that has come up even more, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. After COVID-19 pandemic, for example, you might have seen a lot of these courses, let's say, offered online, a 3-month course, a 2-week course, or a 6-month course being offered by different institutes, focusing on specific areas, focusing on specific skills. Let's say there are a lot of institutes that are now offering short-term courses, claiming that they will help you master AI, claiming that they will help you master these AI tools. All this is a part of non-formal education. This usually has flexible access, means it is not like the school thing. In the schools, if you remember, there was no admission in the middle of the year. When you start the year, you end the year, there was no admission allowed in the middle of the year. In this informal or non-formal education, it has flexible access. You can join anytime, you can leave anytime. A lot of it is done online, so you don't even have to be present at one specific place. It focuses on skill development. The focus much more lies on the fact that whether you will get a job after this or not. In other words, does it have return on investment or not? This ROI word has emerged very, very recently now. Earlier, we did not used to have this word associated with education. Now we focus a lot on ROI. If I am giving 1 lakh rupees to a course to study something, would it give me or would it help me find a job that is good enough for me to repay this much money? That is where non-formal education focuses on. It also focuses on marginalized and weaker section in most cases. When there is a section of the society that is kept away from this general education, the formal education structure, this is where this kind of an education system can come in. So this is how you can also categorize the education system in a country, formal versus non-formal. In any country, not just India, there are certain areas where the governments focus on in the education system. First one being the government expenditure. Now this is where India lags far, far, far behind than where we are. For example, for a very, very long time, the government has made an aim that they want to have a government expenditure of education equivalent to 6% of GDP. That is the government's goal. That whatever our total GDP is, we would like to spend 6% of that GDP number on our government expenditure. Now, before I go ahead, a very quick clarification here. A lot of times when we study statistics like this, that government wants to spend 10% of GDP, 5% of GDP, one confusion that many people have is GDP does not mean the total expenditure of the government. Please understand this. When we say government wants to spend 6% of GDP, that does not mean that out of the total expenditure the government is making, 6% of that will be in education. No. GDP is not the government's total expenditure. GDP rather is the expenditure of everyone in the country. We will study later on when we go ahead with class 12th NCERTs that there are various methods of calculating GDP. GDP calculation methods involve a lot of different things. For example, one of them is the expenditure method, where you add up expenditure of everyone in the country, including the government. So don't misunderstand GDP as the government's expenditure. That is not how it works. So first, the government especially would like to increase its expenditure on education. The aim is to take it to 6% of GDP. as of today, we are not even at half of that. And you can blame the government if you want to, but the problem is that with the education or with the kind of expenditure that the government has, a lot of expenditure goes into other ministries like defense, railways, they have agriculture, farmer welfare. They are big budgeted items where the government has to spend a lot of money. Since the government then is not left with a lot of money, this is where it is lagging. And not just education, there are various other areas where the government should have spent much more. Another area, for example, is R&D, research and development. On R&D, for example, the government of India's expenditure is 0.7% of GDP, which is way lesser as compared to other countries with which we would like to compete. China, US, they have a much larger GDP also, and even their expenditure as a percentage of GDP is higher. Their expenditure is close to 2.5%, 3% of GDP. So our research and development expenditure is also very low. This is why you will see that you will not see a lot of new inventions or scientific discoveries happening in India. I'll give you a very simple example. Remember the COVID-19 vaccine that all of us had? There were mainly two vaccines in India of COVID-19. Mainly there was a Covaxin and the other was Covishield. Covishield was the one that was given to majority of Indians, if you remember. Covishield was being manufactured by an Indian company called the Serum Institute. I am sure you will all remember this. The Serum Institute of India is the company that was manufacturing Covishield. But that does not mean that they invented it. Who invented Covishield? Who were the people who did all the research and they found out that this is how the vaccine is to be made? Any idea? Covishield was actually developed or invented by Oxford University along with some pharmaceutical company like AstraZeneca. It was actually the Oxford University that did all the research and invented the formulation of Covishield. When they got the formula, when they understood everything how Covishield has to be made, then the Covishield formula and the method to make it was then transferred. It was given to Serum Institute. They were told that now you go ahead and make it in bulk quantity. So as you can again see, we are good in manufacturing stuff if we are given the formula that okay, this is how you should make it, this is the procedure. But it was not something that was developed in India. This is where R&D comes into picture. When you are developing something new, you have to spend a lot more money because even for example, let's say you give a scientist 500 crore rupees and tell them go and find a cure for cancer. They would require a lot of money, they will do their experiments and research. There is still a possibility that after spending all that money, they may still come out and say, no, we were not successful, we failed. And as a government, you have to be ready for that. This is where R&D expenditure matters, where you have to spend a lot more money, and the government of India does not do that because a lot of our money goes into other areas. Then the government also focuses on scholarships and loans. Now in India's case, you would have also noticed it, we do not have a lot of scholarships in India. Loan facility, education loan facility is not that difficult. Most of the people do manage to get education loans. But in terms of scholarship, you will not see a lot of scholarship being offered by our Indian institute. There are few of them, but again, those are very restricted. Like if you're an Indian student applying to a foreign university, there are a lot more scholarship options available. In India, that is still very shrink. And most of the scholarship anyways that is given is mostly from big business houses, the big business group, or from the institute itself, rather than the government actually offering scholarship. There are different types of scholarship. For example, there is merit-based scholarship, that if you are someone who has always been a topper, who has always had a great track record in education, you will be given scholarship. Then there are scholarships on the basis of your financial status. If you come from a very poor financial background, your financials are very weak, you are not able to afford education, but you, with your hard work, you were able to get admission, they say, okay, we'll help you out, don't worry. This is how scholarship usually work. In India, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of scholarship-based culture. Education institutions, the government has been trying to improve the quality of education institution, but that also is something that still needs a lot of improvement. There are many regulatory bodies in India to look into the working of education institutions, but as we have seen mushrooming of private education institutions, especially in fields such as, let's say, engineering, we have seen their quality degrading considerably. We have seen only a few of them actually being smart enough or actually being good enough to churn out high quality people. And this is where the problem also accentuates. This is what the government also is focusing on. We'll talk more about education in a bit. Let's come to health. In the health part, as I said, health again is a big component of human capital formation. In healthcare specifically, the government spends or has to spend money in a lot of different subsectors. Health, for example, would also include expenditure in hospitals and clinics. There are a bunch of government hospitals that are set up at different levels. There are primary healthcare centers, there are secondary healthcare centers, there are tertiary healthcare centers, there are government clinics. But all of you know for a fact that if you fall ill and if you can afford to pay fees of a private hospital, there is hardly anyone who would then go to a government hospital. In almost every case, again, I'm not talking about the super specialty one like AIIMS. That is an exception. AIIMS is a super specialty hospital. Let's remove that from your mind for a bit. Apart from that, the district hospitals that you have, the local government hospitals that you have, unless you don't have money to afford private education, to private healthcare rather, there is almost a very limited chance that you will actually go to a government hospital. Because we all know that the status or the level of healthcare facilities that are provided are not adequate enough. There is no such pattern of taking an appointment. There's a lot of waiting period. All of these are big issues. So the government does spend a lot of money on hospitals and clinics, but a lot more needs to be done. The government runs a lot of vaccination programs in India. We have the Indradhanush program for vaccination for children, where the small children have to be given vaccination against a bunch of diseases. COVID-19 vaccination program also proved how India has been successful in rolling out vaccinations. For example, India a few years back was declared as a polio-free country. India's journey from being a country where a bunch of polio cases were found to being a polio-free country is also a testament to a successful, a very, very successfully run polio vaccination program. This is also something that proves that vaccination programs have been effective and successfully implemented in India at a very, very large scale. Then sanitation again is something which the government is struggling with. Sanitation facilities require a lot of planning. Just take this example. In a lot of our big Indian cities, there are slums, unauthorized colonies where people are not supposed to live, but they have constructed something. Because there was no planning attached to it, in most of those slums, you will not have any water facility, no water connection. You will not have any sewage connection, which obviously leads to problem of sanitation. Then clean drinking water, something which is a priority for the government. The government, for example, is running the Jal Jeevan mission, under which they want to provide tapped connection in every household across the country. Preventive medication, as the name suggests, to have medication that prevents you from falling ill rather than waiting for the person to fall ill. Vaccination also will be a part of preventive medication only. Curative medicine means after the person has fallen ill, medicines after that, and public health campaigns to raise awareness. All this are responsibilities of the government, and the government shares it at different levels. For example, one big issue with education and health is that both of these are not exclusively central government subjects. If you look at the 7th schedule of our constitution, which has the 3 lists, union list, state list and the concurrent list, education and health do not mention or are not mentioned in the union list. This is where the center and the states have to work together, and this is why you will see, and we will discuss this as we go ahead, This is why you will see, for example, in the field of healthcare, there is a big disparity between healthcare facilities in one state as compared to the other state, because the state governments have a major role to play here in the facilities that they are providing and how successful they are. I just wanted to give you an example here to show you how our progression has been in terms of healthcare expenditure. See this. All this is extremely important data. 2014-15 government health expenditure as a percentage of GDP is only 1.13%. Again, please remember, GDP should not be seen as the total expenditure made by the government in a year. No, that is not what we are saying. GDP rather is the expenditure made by everyone in the country. Only 1.13% of it was made up or was a part of the government health expenditure. Also, if you compare that to the per capita health expenditure, means if you divide the total money spent by the government education, divide that by population. On average, per person, on an average person, the government of India spent close to 1100 rupees. This is obviously much lower than some of the other developed countries. The problem also is because we have humongous population, that number is bound to be lower. 2017-18 out-of-pocket expenditure was 48.8% of total health expenditure. Now, please understand what do you mean by this. Out-of-pocket expenditure, in short, OOP. It is a very important metric when you are comparing healthcare systems of multiple countries. See, in the field of healthcare, insurance plays an extremely important role. How insurance works is, let's say you have bought a health insurance of, let's say, up to 10 lakh, 15 lakh or whatever. That means that if, God forbid, you fall ill, you are in the hospital, you require money for your expenditure or for the hospital bill, the insurance company pays on your behalf. That is the simple idea of insurance. However, you have to pay a premium for it, means there is a monthly fees that you have to pay for it. For example, it depends on a lot of factors, your age, your health condition, etc. So let's say you have taken a 15 lakh rupees cover, so up to 15 lakh bill, if it comes, they will handle it. In return, you have to pay a monthly fee or a yearly annual, let's say, of 10,000, 15,000 rupees or whatever. The problem is, if you are healthy throughout the year, you did not take advantage of that facility of insurance, the money that you gave to the insurance company, that is gone. They will not return it to you, obviously. So a lot of Indians do not take health insurance. India has a very marginal health insurance penetration. In India, in fact, the usual pattern that we have seen is, in India, if you are working in the corporate sector, in the formal sector, then the insurance that is given to you is a part of an offering by the company. So company makes sure that you are covered under the insurance plan. Secondly, if you are a government employee, then the government insurance facilities apply to you. Thirdly, what the government has done now, what has improved the situation in the past few years, is the government's Ayushman Bharat scheme, under which a lot of people are getting insurance. But there are very few people in India that actually have taken insurance where they themselves pay for the money. Even after these schemes by the government and corporate sector offering insurance, the fact is that insurance penetration is still very low in India. Now what happens is, let's say you are admitted in the hospital and you fall sick, you apply to the insurance company. Usually insurance company may not give you the entire bill amount. They may cover a large part of it, but some part of it may not be covered. So the remaining part that you have to pay from your own pocket, it may be 100%. If you have not taken insurance, then 100% expenditure will be from your pocket. Or if you have taken insurance, maybe they give a part of it, other expenditure you are doing on your own. That is called out-of-pocket expenditure. Higher the out-of-pocket expenditure, worse it is for the economy, because it shows that the people may not have taken health insurance. Also, when you don't have health insurance, you are much less likely to visit the hospital. In most cases, you would have seen that. Even if people fall ill, their first reaction is, oh, I won't go to a doctor, I won't go to the hospital. they just charge a lot of money. So India has had a very high out-of-pocket expenditure. And with the cost of healthcare increasing drastically, we also have a situation wherein even if you fall ill once with a serious disease, it will be good enough to take away all your life savings. And this is where it's important for the people, for example, to take healthcare insurance. So in India, out of pocket expenditure was almost half of the total health expenditure. So almost half of the money spent in healthcare was going from people's own pocket, which is a bad thing. That should not happen. That forces people towards bankruptcy. Next, landmark 2021-22, where the government's total health expenditure increases. As a percentage of GDP, it becomes 1.84. So again, it was 1.13 2014-15. It increases in after 7 years, it increases to 1.84. So there is an increase. Per capita expenditure on health in education or health expenditure also increases. Per capita expenditure becomes 3,100, almost 3 times as compared to where it was in 2014-15. That is again a big jump, a significant jump, something positive. 21-22 out of pocket expenditure also decreases to less than 40%, which is again a very big number. A big part of this was because of the Ayushman Bharat scheme. Under the Ayushman Bharat scheme, the 5 lakh insurance cover offered by the government, where government will pay the premium on your behalf. This helped a lot of people reduce the out of pocket expenditure. 2024-25, Ministry of Health and Welfare, the budget was increased to close to 91,000 crore. So there has been an increasing realization from the side of the government, especially if you see an interesting trend. See the numbers that increased 2021-22, 2021-22, 24-25. How is it that the numbers increased? What happened? What happened was a COVID-19 pandemic. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the governments around the world, including India, realized the fact that they now cannot afford to spend lesser money on healthcare. They have to spend much more and have a much better infrastructure in place to be prepared with these kind of challenges in the future. You cannot expect that such kind of issue, a pandemic will not happen again. It may happen again and you have to be prepared with that. And this is where the government increases expenditure. So the result was seen after just a few years here. When we talk about out-of-pocket expenditure, usually these are the things that are covered under out-of-pocket expenditure, meaning that these are the things that usually the insurance companies do not pay for. Even if you have taken an insurance scheme, they will not pay for consultation fee usually. So usually when you go to a doctor, if you have something wrong, you go to their clinic, they will inspect you, they will write a note or they will prescribe you some medicine, you come back. Unless you are admitted to the hospital, unless you have something that requires hospitalization, usually you do not see insurance companies covering that. That is an out-of-pocket expenditure. Diagnostic tests again usually are not covered. Medication most cases are not covered. Hospitalizations covered in most insurance policy, but if you don't have insurance, then obviously you will have to pay from your own side. Transportation, ambulance, etc. in many insurance policies will not be covered. In a lot of these cases, these are the factors that are responsible for pushing up the out-of-pocket expenditure. And this is why you, as I said earlier, there is a trend that you will see most of the people trying to avoid going to the hospital or trying to avoid visiting a doctor. Not because they don't want to get well, but because they know going to a hospital, visiting a doctor would mean a lot of expenditure from their own pocket, leading to them opting out of it. This is what the government has done in the past few years to improve the situation. I've already discussed the Ayushman Bharat scheme. Very recently, the government added another dimension to it, where all the senior citizens across the country are now also covered under this. Without any exception, the senior citizens will also be covered under this after a certain age. That will also reduce the expenditure of out of pocket. Government is also focusing on reducing dependence on private sector. Because as I said earlier, all the problems that we are discussing, the problems of healthcare, the problems of education, all these problems that we are discussing are essentially problems from the public sector. If you can afford, if you can afford to pay for better education in private sector, if you can afford to pay for better healthcare in the private sector, then you won't have all these problems. These problems that we are discussing, for example, high out-of-pocket expenditure, low research and R&D, Mr. Ambani, for example, will not be concerned with this because he anyways has access to the best of hospital, to the best of facilities available. This is where it is different. Government is also improving knowledge base. Government is also trying to focus a lot on preventive healthcare. One other thing that the government is doing in the past few years is focusing a lot on Indian traditional medicines. Or traditional healthcare. For example, Ayush. We have a special Ayush ministry now. The world has shown a lot of interest in taking all these facilities. Ayush stands for what? Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani naturopathy, Siddha and homeopathy. Again, Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani naturopathy, Siddha, homeopathy. A lot of people increasingly come to India to have these alternate sources of medication, alternate source of treatment. Indian government has realized this fact. For example, the World Yoga Day celebrated something that India initiated at the UN. So India has given a lot of these options to the world. A lot of people, for example, come to India for all of this. Now, one other aspect of it I would like to highlight here. India also, interestingly, is kind of becoming a hub for what you call as medical tourism. India is a hub for medical tourism. For example, you will see Chennai especially has become a hub for medical tourism. Countries near to India, Asian countries, a lot of people come in from Africa also to get good quality affordable education, affordable healthcare in India. But they are coming for the private sector again, they are not coming for the public sector. So private sector, for example, has improved its offering considerably. In the budget, the recent budget 2025-26, the government of India, in fact, announced something called Heal in India. Heal in India was announced as a part of India's offering for medical tourism, making sure that people who are coming from outside India have enough options available, have enough facilities available where they can take advantage of all these facilities. But somehow the public healthcare sector is not up to the mark. All these facilities are in the private healthcare sector. It is the public healthcare sector where problems still exist. The third part, we have discussed two parts of this. The third part of human capital, where the government focuses a lot, is called on-job training. We saw something about education, we saw something about healthcare. Now, what is on-job training and what exactly happens here? Now, understand this idea. When you apply for a job, when you go into a job, you obviously would need some sort of training. There are two ways in which you may be trained. First, the college or the university that you went to, they gave you the training, the course that you did, they gave you all the education, the skills that are required. But a lot of companies are not happy with that. So the companies will offer you on-job training. On-job training will be something like, let's say you joined a company, they gave the offer letter, but they will say the first 3 months or the first 6 months or 7 months, whatever, is your training period. We will pay you a salary, don't worry. May not be the complete salary, maybe half a salary. We'll keep paying you the salary, but first few months will be just your training, so that you are trained about what exactly to do, how does a company work, and after you are successful, after we are satisfied, the company is satisfied with the performance that you have, then we will continue with it and we'll increase your salary. That is a part of on-job training, where the people are trained on the job. Now, on-job training improves productivity because the companies can then train the people on exactly the skill set that they want. It's not that Because see, the company may not know what has been taught to you in college. Maybe the thing that is taught to you in college is not something that is relevant for the company then. So they would improve your productivity, improves the return for the company, encourages innovation as well. People are also happy to learn. They don't feel that, oh, they are out of place. They know how to work. They know how to do all the work that the company is asking from them to do. That works for both the parties. There's in-house training, means you join the company, you go to company office, and then they will give you the training there. Or there's off-campus training where you are employed by the company, but they are not giving you training. The company might have a partnership with some other institute to give training to you. Let's say you join TCS. TCS will tie up with some other institute, and you will have to go to that institute to take training. TCS will pay them on your behalf. These are different types of training. Now, the very interesting way to look at it is not just the private sector that is doing it. Even the government is doing this for its own civil servants. So there has been a big issue like this. When you become an IAS officer, for example, you can clear the examination, you are given multiple months of training at the training center in Mussoorie. But after that, when you join and when you become an IAS officer throughout your service, after that the training doesn't really happen. But see, within your years of service, let's say you're an IAS officer for 10, 15, 20 years, in between a lot of new things will come up, lot of new innovations would come up, and you would be expected to make policies for those. How can you make policies if you don't even know about them, if you don't even know how these things work, if you don't have training? So what the government has done is, government has started something called Mission Karma Yogi. The government of India has started something called Mission Karma Yogi. The idea is, under this mission, the civil servants are given training. The civil servants are told how exactly is it, or during your job you have to undertake certain courses here. Just take this example. A few years back, all of a sudden cryptocurrency came in. Very few people knew how cryptocurrency worked at that time. It was a new invention. Many people started to buy it. Now when something like this happens, and then there were hackers who then started to hack systems and they demanded money in crypto. In these kind of cases, the governments have to make policies about cryptocurrency, right? How will we regulate it? Will it be allowed? Will it not be allowed? The taxes on it, etc. It will fall on the civil servants to make these policies. Now, if a civil servant doesn't even know what crypto is or how crypto works, how can you expect the civil servant to make that policy? So this is where, for example, under Mission Karma Yogi, you can have a training about cryptocurrency, about that world, how does it work, so that it is not something that you are unaware of. This is how the government has positioned this. It has started to work now. There are online courses available of different sites or different varieties, and it's just, crypto is just one example. Professors, experts of those fields are being roped in to make these kind of courses, to then offer it to the civil servants, have them train on it. This is how the government is looking at on-job training. So again, on-job training is not just something the private sector is doing. On-job training is also something that the government is now looking into in the form of, as I said, Mission Karma Yogi. One other part of this entire human capital debate is a part about immigration. Now, immigration means people coming into your country. Migration means people going out of the country. In India's case, it is more about migration, more people going outside. While in the case of developed countries like say US, European countries, the word that you will hear on those countries more often is immigration, because people are coming into their country. A lot of people migrate from our country outside for better jobs, for better standard of living, maybe for better educational opportunities. The Indian diaspora, that is Indian origin people living outside India, is the largest diaspora in the world. We have some advantage of it as well, meaning that a huge amount of money comes back to India from these remittances. India is the largest recipient of remittances in the world. Last year, India received over $100 billion, over $100 billion in remittances. Second country was not even at half of where India is. This is where migration helps us. It also has some negative aspects attached to it, obviously. There is brain drain. You might have all heard this debate about brain drain, meaning that a lot of brilliant people, a lot of very skilled people from India, very highly educated, leave India in search for better opportunities, let's say in US or Europe. And then the first question that comes to everyone's mind is, what if they would have stayed in India? What if they would have built their companies in India? How much would it have contributed to India's growth, so on and so forth? These are the kind of thoughts that come to people's mind. But you have to choose between having a lot of remittances coming to you or allowing brain drain. It also helps Indians to earn higher amount of money. When you go outside, it is mostly for the search of better earning, better standard of living. It also ensures that there are challenges in, although there are certain challenges in adapting, we do see people going outside and then in many cases not being able to adjust, not being happy with what they face, the racism or the discrimination that they may see around the world. But migration is, if you look at overall situation, pro versus cons, it is a big strength of India. Right now, for example, you would see if the Prime Minister goes and visits any other country, in almost every country there are thousands of Indians that are waiting for him, because in every country around the world there are thousands and lakhs and even crores of people of Indian origin. And that has been possible because of this migration that we have seen. It is, yes, it is a good food for thought for the government, that what if these talented people could have stayed in the country? What if they would have built their companies in India? But on the other hand, you also have to understand that for that the government has to create such kind of an atmosphere in India. Such kind of facilities have to be given in India where you are able to convince a talented person that you don't have to leave the country, we will take care of your talent. This is where India is lagging right now. So migration is an issue. In fact, increasingly, lakhs of people every year leave Indian citizenship. Lakhs of people in every year voluntarily give up Indian citizenship. They take citizenship of some other country, they go and settle abroad. It is a loss for the country in many cases, because a lot of them, most of them were influential, heavy earning people. They contributed very significantly to our own economy, something that will be a huge loss if a lot of people of these kind actually start going outside. There is also another aspect of human capital formation, that is information. Free flow of information is the bedrock of any successful democracy. Free flow of information helps a person to make important decisions, to choose your decisions wisely. For example, only when I have enough information to understand what kind of jobs are available in the market, what kind of packages or what kind of salary is being offered for a certain course, what is the kind of, let's say, who are the faculties that are available at some institute, what is the worth of a degree or a certificate that I am getting. Only when I have all that information would I be able to make an informed decision that will be best suitable for me. Government of India, for example, ensures that there is as much flow of information as possible, as transparently as possible. We also have right to education in India, as you know. Under right to education, citizens of India have the right to ask for information from the public authorities, and the public authorities must respond to this request within 30 days time period. This is something that the government has been giving a push to ensure that people make informed choices, informed decisions. It also reduces uncertainty. When you make an informed decision, you know about the pros and cons of a certain decision. You know the outcome of the decision that you have taken. All that helps you out. Then it also optimizes a resource allocation. how the government, because see, we are a country of limited resources, just like any other developing country. The government has to decide how to allocate resources. For example, if the government, let's say, decides that a certain government scheme will only be given to a certain group of people, people should be informed, everyone should be informed. Why is it that this group specifically was chosen? Is their income lesser than the others? Is it that this group is facing some other challenges as compared to others? All this information must be freely available, so that the people who are looking at the government, who are trying to adjudicate whether the government is taking the right decision or not, all these people should actually be informed about the government's decision, and they should trust the government more, or they would trust the government more when the information is freely and transparently available. This is what flow of information does. Now, human capital is very closely linked to the idea of economic growth. The factors that we discussed, education, healthcare, migration, all of these have a direct impact on the economic growth of the country. The more that people are educated, the better are the chances of them finding a good job. The more that people are healthier, that means they are not falling sick, they will go to work more days, they will contribute more taxes, they will not be a burden on the government healthcare facilities. Because when a person falls ill, first of all, the person is not contributing to the country's GDP. They are not contributing in the form of taxes. Not just this, if they try and take advantage, or if they try and, let's say, get admitted to a government hospital, then on the other hand, they are also taking advantage of the government hospitals, or they're also taking advantage of the government sources there. All that is a big issue that the government has to focus on. So, human capital and the economic growth of a country is very, very, very clearly linked to each other without any doubt. If you see here, education, as I said, boosts your efficiency, it boosts the outcome of a person. Imagine this, there are two people, same age group, one person who is only, let's say, class 10th passed, the other person who has done his MBA or engineering or PhD or whatever. Who has the higher probability of getting a better job? Who has the higher probability of earning more? Now, please understand, exceptions can be anywhere. I'm not talking about exceptions. You can say, but I know a person who is uneducated but earning crores of rupees. I know a dropout who is earning a lot of money. I'm not talking about those rare cases. In usual cases, when the person is just given a job or is earning on the behalf or on the basis of the degree that they have, the education that they have, imagine in which of the two scenarios do you expect the person to have a better job? It is obviously the scenario where the person is more highly educated. Similarly, increased income would mean employment opportunities obviously increase significantly. When you have more income, you have a situation where the skilled workers will have more job prospects, skilled workers will have more opportunities to jump. Take this example. Let's say, a lot of times people argue that an engineering graduate, for example, I'm just taking an example here, a lot of people argue that, see, an engineering graduate after graduation starts with a low salary. Let's say someone starts with a salary of 30,000 rupees per month, fine. And then you say, but that I know a cab driver who earns 40,000 rupees per month. And they start laughing that, why, what was the need of that degree? What was the use of that degree if a cab driver illiterate is earning more than you? But that is not how you compare. The person with the engineering degree who is now earning 30,000 rupees per month, as he grows with experience and the jobs that he changes, the switches that he makes, his or her income will obviously improve drastically as he or she goes ahead. The same progression will not be seen in other areas where we're talking about cab driver or informal sector. The same transition will not be seen there. This is where you have to understand the power of education, the power of getting that degree, the power of actually making your job or making your career in that kind of a field where you are learning and experiencing. And this is where your income opportunities increase much, much more. Technological advancements, as the people who are more educated are likely to adapt to more skills, likely to adapt to more technology, they will obviously find better earning opportunities as compared to others. Apart from this, improved health, as I said, improves the productivity of the people, ultimately contributing to the economic growth of the country. People not falling ill, people not being a burden on the government infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure, it is all a contributor to economic growth. Similarly, education also means that people are more aware of their duty towards the country. Education is not just about people getting a job. For example, when people are more educated, they are more aware of their responsibility towards the country. Let's take a very simple example. In the past few years, a lot of stress has been made on waste segregation. That when you put your waste outside for the municipality to come and pick it up, you have to, or you should try to segregate it. The wet waste should be separate, dry waste should be separate, because there are different ways of recycling them. If you mix them up, it is almost impossible to then segregate it at later on. So segregation at source is the best way possible. Now understand and then think about it. Who has a better chance of understanding this? An educated person or an uneducated person? An educated person has a better chance of understanding what this issue is, and they are expected to do this in a much better, in a much more informed manner. So better education also makes you a better positive participant in the governance of the country. It also makes sure that you have inclusive growth. A country that is more educated, the country that is more skilled, would have better chances of reaching a stage of equality, reaching a stage where the difference between the rich and the poor decreases. All these are contributors to economic growth time and time again. And we are not just talking on random basis. There is data, there is proof, there is empirical evidence to suggest that the countries that spend much more on human capital, that focus much more on human capital, actually have much better results than other countries. Take this simple example. Whenever there are global rankings about various things, for example, let's say Human Development Index, or there are rankings about the quality of life, standard of living in different countries, it's very strange that you will see a few countries time and time again coming at the top. There are few countries that continuously are ranked at the top. For example, Norway, Sweden, Finland. How is it that these countries keep on coming at the top time and time again? Something must be happening right in these places, right? What is it that's happening correctly? It is the focus that they have put on human capital development. The focus that they have put on spending the money in human capital that is required for their countries right now to progress. So Norway, Sweden, Finland, for example, all of these have these higher investment in their healthcare services, higher investment in their education. All of that has led to a much better growth output. Not just that, if you look at Asia itself, East Asian economies, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, they are all examples of how spending more money in these areas might seem to be boring, but it is actually something that gives you a much better long-term result. Rather than having a situation wherein you are not able to spend a lot of money, rather than a situation where a lot of your money, for example, let's say goes into subsidies, a lot of your money goes into certain government schemes that is just to appease people. Let's say what is happening in India, as you can see in our elections, the promises that the political parties make are about free electricity, free water, we will write off your loans, you don't have to pay the loan back. Very few of these elections are actually fought on the fact that, okay, we will improve our healthcare, or I will spend more money on education, I will spend more money on healthcare. Hardly ever you will see any party talking on those lines. And the result then is this. The countries that actually do that Rather than spending the limited money that they have on freebies or subsidies, they have historically shown a much, much better result when it comes to human capital development. And there is again all of this to prove. In India also, the IT sector, that is the biggest contributor to our GDP, that sector also has been booming because of a lot of government investment and government focus there. Because of a lot of government policies to make sure that IT gets a push, IT industries are given an encouragement from the side of the government of India. That is why these countries, or that is why India has been able to work much better, and we have seen the results in the IT sector specifically. Now, there are two terms where a lot of people get confused, which I don't want to happen to you. There is a term human capital, and then there's a term called human development. Related to each other but slightly different from each other. Let's try and understand the difference, because UPSC also, in the mains examination, in the prelims also, they have asked the difference between these two. They have asked the difference between human capital and human development. So let's try and understand that. Let's first focus on human capital. Human capital basically is something which is investment in important fields, as we have been discussing, something that results in skills, experience, health, the things that we have been discussing. Those factors that help a person be more productive. Those factors that help a person be a better or a larger contributor to the overall economy of the country. Those factors come under human capital. As we have been discussing, governments focus on education, health, information flow, all these are parts of human capital. In this idea of human capital, human beings are means to an end. They focus on enhancing the productivity and economic efficiency of the human being specifically. So the idea is, as we discussed, the more skills that you give to a person, the better healthcare that you provide to a person, more are the chances that he or she will contribute to the economy back in a much bigger way. So better economic contribution would only happen when the person has been given enough skills, has been given the backing required, and has been given the support of healthcare, the support of all this infrastructure that the government has. That is the idea. That is what human capital is. On the other hand, human development focuses on some other factors. For example, it focuses on the overall well-being of the individual. For example, is the human life meaningful or not? They focus more on social welfare. They focus more on, let's say, not whether you are able to contribute to the economy. Even if, let's say, you are a person who is educated, who is someone who has the best degree available, you are very healthy, even then you can't be forced to work. Why do we assume that someone with a very good degree, someone with a very good knowledge skill will only be working? Let's say I have a great degree. I still don't want to work. I am happy the way I am. In case of human capital, that is not the desired result. Because in case of human capital, when all this expenditure has been done from the government, when the government has invested in your upbringing, the government has invested a lot of money in your development, the government would expect that at the end of it, there will be a good amount of economic output that they can expect from your side. In case of human development, the idea is not to extract a lot of economic resources from you. In case of human development, the idea is that are you happy, are you satisfied with the way that your life is going? As long as you are satisfied, as long as you are happy about your life, about your living status, etc., that is where human development is achieved. This is the difference between the two. Again, human capital treats people as a resource that should be developed. So the focus is whether or not they are contributing to the GDP of the country, whether or not the income level is improving or not. So if the country's GDP is not improving, if the country's income level, per capita income, national income is not improving, if that is the case, then human capital development is not taking place. Human capital focuses on all these things. Only when this factor is achieved, only in that scenario is human capital happening or human capital formation is happening. On the other hand, human development focuses on other factors, as we discussed. They focus on issues such as human development index, life expectancy has improved or not, literacy rates have improved or not, are people, for example, helpful for each other or not, do people understand how a society works, are the people, let's say, contributing in the election process or not, when the government asks for people to come out and vote, do the people actually realize their responsibility, do they come out to vote or not in large numbers? All of those things then are a part of human development. So that is how it is different. Human capital focuses more on things that are hard economics, that is resulting in certain numbers, income, those kind of things. Human development may be more focused on human well-being, as far as they are happy, as long as they are happy, human beings at an individual level are happy, human development has been achieved. Now coming to the idea of what does a government do? Where is it that the government has to focus, and where is it that they do focus on when it comes to human development or human capital formation rather? What are the areas? And we'll go into sector by sector. First, start with education sector. We did have a few discussion about that, if you remember. The role of the government in the education sector. Let's go into it a bit deeper. What does a government do in the education sector? And we are taking specifically the example of India. First, policy framework. All the education policies are made by the government, and they include the framework of education. For example, policies may include from your passing percentage till the years of education. Let's say if you want to enroll in PhD, what years of experience should you have before that? How long would your PhD be? What will be included in that? All those kind of frameworks. Government, for example, has been focused on implementation of National Education Policy. The National Education Policy 2020 was released by the government recently, and the government is trying to implement that. Now please understand, the term policy does not mean a law. What I mean is, if a national education policy has come out and let's say it has 100 suggestions, all those 100 are not automatically binding. It is not that those 100 suggestions have been given by the policy, so now all those 100 have to be accepted, or nothing like that actually happens. When you have a policy, let's say national education policy, the result is that after this policy has been given, the government then decides which of these do they want to implement and which of these would they not want to implement. Like with national education policy, they said some very interesting ideas. Take this example. When we were in school, and let's say I wanted to study physics, take a very random example here. Let's say in school I wanted to study physics. The only option I had was, I'm talking about class 11, 12, the only option I had was that, okay, then study physics, chemistry and maths together, and then have English and maybe one other subject, let's say computer. There was no option available wherein I could say that no, I want to study physics plus history plus accounts plus something else, let's say Sanskrit. There was no such option available because there was a set pattern that this is the combination that you can opt for. PCM, PCB, commerce, this is what we used to call it, right? The national education policy says no, that cannot continue. The student must have the flexibility to choose, because the rule is you have to have 5 subjects in class 12, full stop. For example, that is the rule, 5 or 6, whatever. Which 5? The law doesn't say which 5. So let the student decide which 5. Why do you force the student that no, with physics, chemistry is compulsory? I don't want to study chemistry. That is what the national education policy says, that there should be much more flexibility now to the student. For example, if you go to study in some of the best universities in the world, let's say you go to Harvard to study physics or to study computers, In between that, you entered a class where drama is happening, where drama is being taught. You can attend that class also. So you can be studying physics or astrophysics at the same time as you are studying drama. That is allowed. But in India, that is not that is not how our education system works. So national education policy is trying to do that. The government is trying to implement that, be flexible. Government also, for example, one of the initiatives the government has taken is right to education, as you know, that provides free education from class 6 to class 14. That is a part of fundamental rights also, Article 21A. These are some of the examples of what the government is trying to do in the field of education. Sometimes they are successful. In many other occasions, they may not be as successful as they would have hoped for. But this is something that they are trying to achieve in the long run. As I said in the beginning, the government is trying very hard to improve, or to rather increase, its expenditure on education. The goal that the government has is to reach up to 6% of GDP as education expenditure. Unfortunately, we are far below this goal for many years. The other problem that we have is a very high dropout rate, especially amongst the girls. It's a very interesting and intriguing pattern that is seen in Indian education. So there is free education from age 6 to 14 up to class 8. Once that is expired, once that class 8 thing goes away, there is a steep dropout, that is a steep jump in the dropout rate, means people who are opting out of school. Around the same time, you have a much larger dropout for girls. Because when a family then has to take a decision that now I have 2, 3 or 4 kids for whom now I have to pay the school fee. Earlier I was not paying for them. Now I have to pay the school fee for them. Now you have to take a call whether you would choose or whether you would want each and every one of them to go to school. Can you afford each and everyone's fees? If not, in most of the cases, unfortunately, the girl is told that no, you can't go to the school anymore. There's a very large scale dropout rate. A lot of these government schools don't even have separate washroom sanitation facility for girls. That also is a big concern. Because of that, the government is focusing on improving statistics of girl education specifically. Building of schools, educational facilities, again a topmost priority for the government. We do have a lot of public schools, but their infrastructure is far from satisfactory. They are still lagging behind in the most basic amenities. And the most basic amenities, again, as I told you, include sanitation facility, separate washroom for boys and girls, drinking water facility, and in a lot of cases, even the facility of just desk and a chair. You will see in a lot of government schools, children sitting on the floor, obviously not in a very comfortable situation. You know, it's very easy to say, no, whoever wants to study can study anywhere. But no, that is not the case. Imagine you sitting in a room with 45-degree temperature without a fan, without an AC. And other person who is sitting in the same room with fan and AC, who would be able to concentrate better? Obviously, the person who has facility will be able to concentrate better. There is no doubt about that. So when you say things like, oh, no, who has to study can study anywhere, that is not how it works. In fact, not just the schools, in colleges, I don't know if you saw this or not, just weeks back, there was this video that became very viral of a college in Delhi University, where Delhi University College, what is happening, one of the student leaders, what he is doing is he has that cow dung and he is putting the cow dung on the walls of the principal's office. Why? Because the principal had said, when the students demanded that we should have air conditioners, the classes in Delhi, for example, it goes to 45, 48 degrees Celsius in summers, classes don't have ACs. So students demanded that we should have air conditioner. So the principal had suggested, put cow dung on the walls, it will cool down the room. And the same thing was then something that the students retaliated, saying that the principal should also do the same in their own offices. Now, again, for a university where graduate students are, Even if you can't even afford an air conditioner, after so much funding that goes in, there has to be some problem. So building that infrastructure, building that, all that is important. Again, I'm not saying that everywhere we should have an air conditioner. The point is not about air conditioner. The point is about having conducive environment for people to study. You can't expect a person being physically very uncomfortable and then forcing them to study. That will just not happen. So you have to, the government has to make sure that from the primary level till the higher education level, you're at least making an environment, building an environment where the person is able to study. The government also has been trying to regulate private institutions. It's a very interesting case of private institution. Like talk about schools, for example. Do you know as per the law in India, education institutions are supposed to be non-profitable only, not for profit. You cannot run a school or a college for profit. You cannot show any profit. Even then, you will see the schools, for example, private schools, increasing their fees year after year without much regulations. There are regulations that are imposed on schools through regulatory bodies. The government has, for example, CBSE board, IC boards that tell the schools what curriculum to follow, so that the schools don't just randomly follow whatever they want. The government also is focusing on improving skill development, improving the level of skills that people have. For so many decades in India, the focus has always been on rote learning. Like in India, it's a very funny thing. All throughout your years of schooling, you will all be able to study, for example, what is a chair made up of, what are different types of woods. In physics, you will also study when a person sits on the chair, the force is applied in which direction, how to calculate that force, all you will be studying that. But if I give you wood and tools and ask you to make that chair, most of you will not be able to make the chair. So you know how the chair works, you know the forces applied on it, but you won't be able to actually create that chair because our education system doesn't focus on that. Our focus is increasingly on calculating stuff, trying to come up with the correct calculation. That is what our focus has been on, rather than focusing on actually practical things, which is where we are lagging right now. Then the health part. What is the role of the government in the health part or the health sector, the education thing that we study? In the health sector also, again, because of the scale of our population and a lot of people not being able to afford private education, private healthcare rather, most of them are dependent on the government healthcare facilities. This is what makes them more vulnerable as compared to others, because the government facilities are not up to the mark. If you go to government hospitals, you want to get, let's say, an X-ray done, an MRI done, either their machines will not be working. If they are working, they'll have such a long waiting period, you will be told to come after 6 months. This has happened. Persons who want X-ray immediately to see whether their hand is broken or not, they are told that there's a 200 people waiting period, you are 200 first. Come back after so many days. What will you do? You obviously can't be home with a broken hand. So you say, okay, I'll rather go to a private facility. That is what happens, unfortunately. The public healthcare sector focuses on establishing hospitals, clinics. The government runs vaccination programs, public health programs, as we discussed. The government also runs schemes like National Health Mission, Ayushman Bharat as an insurance scheme. The government, again, spends quite a significant amount of money on healthcare, but it's just not enough in proportion to the population that we have in India. And it's not just about the population. It's about the quality of population, or the population that doesn't earn enough to go to private sector. This is where the problem starts. And this is where the government has to focus on a lot of these facilities being given. The government, for example, focuses on ensuring practices in the private hospitals. They have to take government licenses. The government undertakes inspections. The government regulates their working. The government also has to control diseases that are spreading across the country, like the COVID-19 pandemic that you saw. Apart from that also, the government keeps analyzing the data about different types of flu, different types of microbes, viruses that are that are spreading and that have a chance of being spread across the country once again. The government focus on health awareness campaigns. You would have seen in the past, for example, so many polio vaccination ads used to come on television. This famous slogan of 2 drops of life, that you have to get this so that you're polio free. Amitabh Bachchan used to do that ad. That's a part of government raising awareness. You would see Prime Minister, for example, talking a lot about these kind of things, ministers talking about these kind of things. All this is government's effort to raise health awareness. There's also a part of government health insurance scheme, as I told you. Ayushman Bharat is an example of that. Because the government has seen, since most of the people are not taking up private insurance or insurance by themselves, the government can't just let them go and basically focus on out-of-pocket expenditure. This is where the government has stepped in and started schemes such as Ayushman Bharat. Now, enough of government criticism. The problem also is that the government itself faces a lot of challenges on its own. It is not that it's a secret to few people that education spend is not good enough, healthcare spend is not good enough. Everyone knows it. It's not a secret. But the focus here is that there are certain challenges that the government faces which are not that easy to solve right now. In terms of healthcare and education, both of these have the problems. The first big problem, as I said earlier, inadequate funding. This is not something that you can actually solve overnight. Despite the fact that the government has inadequate funding in these areas, we still run a budget deficit. See, if the situation was that the government has a lot more spare money but they're not spending here, then you can obviously blame the government. But if year after year India runs in a fiscal deficit, year after year our budget has more expenditure than earning, you can't expect the government then to bring in money. This is where either the private sector has to become more affordable, or the government either has to stop its spending in some other areas and bring the money here. That is why you are increasingly seeing governments focus on cutting down a lot of subsidies. Economic Survey also talks about how the government is trying to reduce its subsidy bill. The government is trying to make sure that the subsidy bill comes down, especially the agriculture subsidy, the food subsidy that we have under National Food Security Program. All that is being done so that the government can put more money into these areas. There's also focus on the quality of service. As I said, the quality of service, the problem does not lie to those people or for those people who can afford to pay more money. The problem here is with the public sector where you are dependent on the government and you can't afford to pay a hefty amount. Issues of regulations, the government regulatory bodies not being good enough, not being able to do their job. Lot of loopholes helping these healthcare sector companies or education sector to actually run whatever way that they want. And there are systemic issues, means long-term issues that you cannot resolve overnight. Like as I said, the dropout rate of girls. It's not something that you can just resolve overnight. There's a long-term policy that has to be implemented and it has to be stuck to in the long run to have the result. All these are issues that we are facing in education and healthcare sector. Look at the issues sector wise now. If you look at the education sector in India, for example, if you look at the growth that the government has seen in terms of expenditure, as I said, the long-term goal of the government is that in the education sector, the government has to reach expenditure of 6% of the GDP. And we are very, very far away from there. The issues is, as I said, first, there are economic constraints. It's easy to say the government should bring in more money, spend more money, but the question is from where? You can't just ask the government to keep printing money and bringing it here. Source of the money has to be identified. Then the problem of social demand. There is expectation of good quality education, but that comes at a cost. There is expectation of better infrastructure, that also comes at a cost. Are you able to then negate that pressure of the people? Are you able to provide them with the kind of facilities that they desire? That's a big issue. Then there is a proper policy decision gap. even when the government tries to undertake certain reforms, their implementation is very often delayed. The National Education Policy of 2020, it has been a few years since it has come in, but even now it has not been implemented properly. So what is the use of that? By the time you implement that, you will see a lot of protests starting once again. You are seeing a lot of discussion about the three language formula. You are seeing a lot of discussion about PM Shri schools, if you have read in the newspaper. The government is, for example, establishing PM Shri schools. These will be model schools that will implement the entire national education policy in every aspect of it to see how successful it is. But that implementation also has not been up to the mark. It has been slow. There's also a problem of bureaucratic hurdles. See, government, when you visualize the government, don't just visualize the ministers. When you visualize the government, think about the bureaucrats as well that are running the show, that are advising the government, the bureaucrats that have the responsibility of implementing the policies. A lot of lethargic attitude in the bureaucratic structure has meant that a lot of policies that the government would otherwise want to implement have not been implemented. A lot of the policy with the government would have actually wanted to go ahead with have not been done successfully because of this bureaucratic structure. All these issues mean that we have not been able to have the kind of result or the kind of impact in education that we actually would have hoped for. One other problem that I discussed in the beginning, if you remember, it is not just about the national level expenditure. India is such a huge country, and education and healthcare are not exclusively central government subjects. This means that the situation across different states is very, very, very different. It depends a lot on what the state government is doing and what the state government is thinking. Look at this, for example. This is the comparison of per capita expenditure on education in different states. In Himachal Pradesh, per capita expenditure on an average person in Himachal Pradesh, over 34,650 rupees are spent on education in a year from the side of the government. In Bihar rather, only 4,088 rupees are spent per person on education per year. Look at the big gap between the two. When you have such a huge gap, how do you expect same kind of output or same kind of result in different states? That would obviously have a major impact, a difference in the infrastructure, difference in learning outcomes, different in the facilities that you would expect. All these are issues that have not been resolved, and there's a big gulf between the states when it comes to education. Even if you look at where does the government spend money in education in different areas, where is it that most of the government money is going? The biggest amount of government expenditure when it comes to education, the biggest amount goes into elementary education. Elementary education, that is the one where the government gives right to education up till class 8th. Then higher education gets a bit of lesser funding, but per capita expenditure is higher here because a lot of people drop out. So the number of people that go ahead for higher education are lesser. Because of that, per capita number becomes bigger. Vocational training, again, government has been focusing now on this in the past few years, focusing on skills, especially helping the people find jobs later, and skill development, again, as per the demand of the labor market. The government, a few years back, the Prime Minister also made this statement that we have such a huge human capital that India can be the provider of talent to the world. See, there are so many countries in the world that are aging rapidly, they don't have enough people to work. Japan, Germany, Italy, even China in a few years. All these have a problem of very high average age, not having enough young people in the population to work and contribute, and thus they are slowing down economically. To correct that problem, they are looking for skilled, expert individuals to come in and work and contribute to the running of their economy. This is where India has a lot of potential. But if an Indian is hoping and aspiring for a job in these countries, you obviously need to have the skill at par with those that are required in that part of the world, right? This is where we are lagging. It's all good to talk about the fact that, oh, we'll provide skilled labor to the work, but you also have to give them the kind of skills that are in demand in other parts of the world. This is what the government has been doing. A few examples of the government schemes in this regard, in the field of education specifically. We have Right to Education Act to give free education up to the age of 14. We have the National Education Policy, the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, that is focusing a lot on elementary education, especially to improve the learning levels. We have Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan for secondary education. We have National Skill Development Mission. All of these are government initiatives that you will study about later in detail in your entire course about what is that the government is doing. Yes, government has seen certain results, certain positive outcomes in all of these, but none of these has had the kind of impact that we had hoped for in the beginning. None of these has been able to change the landscape of Indian education. All of them have played their role in bits and pieces, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. These are the challenges that we were talking about that education sector faces in India. First, as I said, regional disparities. We just had a comparison of, let's say, Himachal Pradesh and Bihar, the amount of money that is spent. And it is not just in between different states. Within the state also, there is a big disparity between rural and urban areas. As expected, if you live in an urban area, the access to education is better. You have more options to choose from, you have more schools, colleges to choose from. You have better, more diverse education as compared to rural areas. There are hardly any options available. You are stuck with a few that are available, and again, you don't have a choice of the kind of the level of education that is imparted by them. There are problems of poor infrastructure. As I said, curriculum is outdated in not just schools, in colleges as well. We are living in a world where technology is changing so rapidly. And even now, a lot of colleges are teaching you stuff that has already become irrelevant. That has still been a big problem. There are issues of mismatch between education and employment. As we discussed, many companies keep on saying the fact that we are ready to hire more people, but the skill that we require are not the skills that are taught in the college. That is the problem of structural unemployment, where the skill is just not matching. There are also issues of inadequate funding. As we said, we are far away from the 6% mark of funding that the government is expecting to bring the expenditure of education to. We are nowhere close. There are also high dropout rates. This is especially true in case of girls. This is especially true in case of people from the weaker section of the society. The moment they think of education as something which is taking away their money, they usually decide to drop out. Because for them, each earning member or each member of the family should be an earning member. So when a kid or a young guy or girl is going to a school or college, their mindset is that why not let him or her stay home and work and earn money for us rather than spending money. All these are issues that have not been solved. And this is where the government can improve in these things. See, in the questions in the mains exam, when they're asking about certain problems and their solutions, if you know the problem part, solution part is very easy to write. If you know, for example, 5 problems, the solution will just be opposite to it, as simple as that. Think of it. We discussed the problem is lack of investment or lack of expenditure. So the solution will be increase the expenditure, as simple as that. If the problem, for example, is lack of research and development, solution will be have more research and innovation. So as long as you understand and know what the real problems are in a certain sector, writing about those and their solutions then is the easiest part. Because solutions are nothing but just the opposite of the problems that you are writing about. So whenever they are asking about solutions, or even if they are not asking you about solutions, they are just asking about the problems, in that case also you can take that step ahead, you can take that initiative to make sure that along with the problems you also write about the solutions. That will always give a much better and a much more holistic look to your answer in the mains answer writing. Now, apart from the ones that we studied, there is also some important data, numbers, facts that I want to share with you. Extremely important for mains answer writing. These are the key issues that we have, specific issues in education sector. If you look at the rural schools, for example, in remote areas, as I told you, the most basic amenities are missing. The most basic amenities that you expect every education system or even a government office to provide to the visitors. Drinking water, washrooms, electricity, even that is missing. We have seen a lot of government efforts. As I said, government is focusing a lot on infrastructure, but somehow the fund going from the government has not reached the place where it should. And we are not seeing the development or the improvement in infrastructure that is required as compared to where we are. It's a very long race that we have to compete, but we have not been able to do that. In 2023, there was a report that said only 47% schools in India have access to drinking water, only 53% have separate toilets for girls. This has to change. This is what leads to high dropout rates, especially amongst the girls after a certain age, and you cannot blame them or the parents for that. Giving education to girls is not just about having a teacher in the classroom teaching something. It's about creating that entire infrastructure where the person feels safe, where the person feels welcomed, and the person does not have to worry about other things. You cannot expect the kid coming to school and constantly worrying about what if I have to go to the washroom. You can't have a kid worrying about what if I feel thirsty, the school doesn't have drinking water, what will I do then? These are not problems that the kids should worry about when they are coming to school. There are also other problems of teacher shortage that we have not talked about so far. Teacher shortage is a big issue that we have faced, and again it comes down to the funding part of it. Thousands of teachers' posts are lying vacant. In rural areas, there are so many schools that are called as one teacher school. Do you know that? One teacher school means one single teacher for the entire school. What do you expect from that teacher and what do you expect from that school? Even if he or she is engaging the entire school, means a situation where a student in class 2, class 5, class 8 or even class 10, all of them studying together, sitting together, what is the teacher expected to do in such cases? And in a lot of the cases where the teachers exist, most of them don't have proper training to teach. Teaching is not something that you can just come up, stand at the podium and then open a book and then start dictating. That is not what teaching is about. It's much, much more than that. The teacher first needs to be trained of how to manage a classroom, how to handle the students, how to teach a certain topic. Only then would it have the kind of impact that we are expecting from our education system. So lack of teachers, and then on top of that, lack of the quality of teachers has had a major impact on the learning outcomes of the students. All that again binds down to the fact that we have insufficient funding. We have much lesser resources allocated to education than we should, because where we stand right now from here to take the leap and be in competition with countries such as China, US, Japan, Germany, you can't imagine that unless you empower the people who are going to school right now to learn or to teach. In both of these cases, an extremely important role has to be of the funding that the government is providing to them. If it is inadequate, there is not much that you can do about it. At the end of the day, the teacher that is coming to the school has to be paid, the infrastructure has to be made, and this is something which no one else can do. Providing funding is the responsibility of the government, something that they cannot shy away from. There are also issues about the lack of learning levels. There is a ASA report that comes out, Annual Survey of Education report. It is a report that is done by Pratham is an NGO that publishes storybooks, affordable storybooks. So Pratham does this survey, Annual Survey of Education report. This is a report that talks about facts such as 70% class 5 kids can't solve a class 2 question, that highlights the gap in the learning level. If you are, for example, studying in class 5, you are expected to be able to solve a certain kind of a question. If you are in class 2, you are expected to be able to solve a certain kind of question or read certain level of text. This is where we have not seen the kind of results that we had hoped for. In most of the schools even today, the focus is on rote learning, means just cramp up whatever is written, don't focus on understanding, don't focus on implications of it. Either the teacher doesn't understand himself or herself how to pass on this knowledge, or the teacher is just not doing it because they are just doing the rote learning, they are just giving the task to remember stuff and check the copy. All that has to change, especially in today's day and age when we have so many tools available to us, where the need to learn stuff is reducing day by day. At that stage of our lives, we cannot expect a learning or education system that is just focused on rote learning somehow. These are the other government initiatives. Again, we'll read about most of them in our courses. This is what the government has been doing. This is not the complete list, but just an example of PM Shri School, as I said, upgrading schools for as per the National Education Policy. PM Vidya Lakshmi Nishtha for upskilling the school teachers nationwide. Government realizes how teachers need to be trained. Then we have the NILP app for adult empowerment, Swayam Plus, etc. All these are platforms that the government has done. At the same time, there are still challenges in human capital formation, the broader challenges that the government faces. First, as I said, much lower government spending in almost all the sectors, be it education, be it healthcare. We are much below the global standards. Insufficient health funding, resource allocation, especially in the rural areas. See, the problem with this also is that over 2/3 of India's population lives in the rural areas. So unless you empower that population, unless you make their lives better, you can't expect the lives of people overall to become better. When you're ignoring 2/3 of your population, you can't expect this to have a positive impact overall. Apart from this, regional disparities as showed are very, very, very bad. There are certain states in India, like in Bihar, Jharkhand, UP, where funding is much lower, where if you fall ill, there are much lesser chances of you recovering, as compared to if you are in a state like Himachal Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, where expenditure and the facilities are much better. We saw that even in the COVID-19 pandemic, different states handled it in a very different manner, depending upon the kind of expenditure they did, depending on the kind of infrastructure and the skilled professionals like doctors, etc. they had. We are living in a country which has so much disparity within the country. This is why many people say India is more of like a continent, where there are so many different states which have their own kind of working. The high dropout rate issue, as I said, there are various factors. There have been questions asked on this also. Why do we have a high dropout rate? Children are seen as an earning member because of high level of poverty in the country. There is inadequate infrastructure, especially for girls, it becomes a problem. And after the free education gets over, the family then has to take a call if they have multiple children. Which child do they want to send to school? For which child can they afford to pay the fee? And this is where, unfortunately, a lot of children, a lot of girl child gets left out. And in a lot of cases, the boy is the one that is given the preference. Unfortunate, but that is how it works. And this is where high dropout rates have become a big problem in India. It has also led to problems of unemployment, underemployment. Underemployment means that you are employed, but not at a level where you should be, not earning as much as you should be. So you are not making the best use of your skills. Unemployment again is a big problem in India. are different types of unemployments are due to various factors. Either you are employed but you're not productivity, or you're not increasing the productivity of the entire organization, you're not earning as such. All these are big problems which can be solved mainly if the government focuses a lot on human capital formation by increasing their funding and by putting a lot more attention. The issue of brain drain, what the focus of the government is, we discussed this earlier when we were discussing about migration, if you remember. There are pros to it. We do get remittances, we do have a strong Indian diaspora because of it, but there are cons as well. A lot of skilled, experienced, knowledgeable people who might have done wonders when they were in the country go outside. A lot of people who would have contributed much more to India's growth story actually end up going outside. India might have been a very different country if these kind of people would have stayed in the country. Brain drain again has its own set of pros and cons. To conclude, human capital still remains a topmost priority for the government, as it should. We have taken considerable strides after over 7.5 decades of our independence. However, the place where we stand right now and the goal that we have of becoming a global leader demands that we make a lot more improvement in key areas such as health, education. These kind of areas require topmost priority from the government, including more expenditure, better policies, better implementation, and much, much, much more. This brings us to the end of chapter number 4 of class 11th NCERT. Do watch the next chapter, that is chapter number 5 now. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.